I've talked about Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead many times on this channel, as it's honestly one of my favorite childhood zombie flicks of all time. And as some of you might already know, I've argued that no matter what the survivors did in character, they were basically cooked to the point of being charred. Staying at the mall? Eventually dead. The island at the end of the movie is miraculously safe? Still out of luck. But what if they weren't operating with poor judgment and emotionally driven decisions? What if, for the sake of argument, we granted the entire group a generous boost in IQ? Could a smarter, more rational version of this crew actually survive? How would this increased intelligence impact the overall plot? That's right, in this particular video, we're going to dive into an alternate timeline. One where competence reigns supreme, where cooler heads prevail, and where survival just might be possible in the long run. This is what Dawn of the Dead could have looked like if the Milwaukee crew was actually smart. But before we dive into this fun thought experiment, allow me to ask y'all for a very quick favor. Most of you watching aren't actually subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, hitting that subscribe and like button really helps the channel to grow, and also helps to keep these videos coming. Now with that quick, cliche, and shameless plug out of the way, let's kick off this scenario by starting at the tunnel pathway, where the core members of the Milwaukee group first cross paths, and where our positive IQ timeline truly begins. Now, funnily enough, the group's decision to avoid heading down the highway was a pretty smart choice. In fact, it was the best move they could possibly make. Remember folks, Michael's original group informed Anna and Kenneth that the road down from the mall was literally, and I quote, thick with those motherfuckers. Michael even let us know that there were initially 8 survivors in his group and clearly only 3 survived. That's literally a fatality rate of 62.5%. Odds are everyone in Milwaukee was trying to get the hell out of Dodge. The freeway was almost certainly clogged by traffic congestion, and the undead were clearly pursuing the fleeing survivors. Traveling on foot into a legit kill zone where super sprinting zombies were feasting like they were at the Golden Corral would not be a good idea. Hence, the Milwaukee group opts to break into the fortress that is the Crossroads Mall. And it's here where we begin to truly change the timeline. Now, when the group first entered the mall in the canon timeline, they opted to eventually split up in the effort to confirm the structure's safety. The smart decision, and fairly common sense decision, would have been to stay together as a cohesive unit, clearing each and every store, room, and hallway as a team. They all should have immediately armed themselves with some improvised weaponry as well, like, say, an aluminum bat from the sporting goods store literally shown in the film, where Michael goes on to dome this one undead freak. Had they done this, Luda would have never been infected during the sneak attack, hence no zombie baby, thus preventing the premature deaths of Luda, Andre, and the old smoker lady. After all of this goes down, and once the crew reaches the elevator, they would come to meet CJ, Bart, and Terry. Now, I think it's pretty clear that CJ was smart, as he must have recognized the importance of manpower. The mall was too big to keep secure against potentially hostile survivors, hence admitting more defenders into the mall would be prudent. Plus, letting them in would also be the ethical choice. However, there really was no need for CJ to take their weapons and lock them up in a store. At least not when it became obvious that Kenneth's group was not hostile. Eventually, the group ends up on the roof because they decided to paint some giant SOS sign on said roof, and then they notice Andy firing away at an undead horde besieging his gun shop. Then, shortly after, they would have seen an apathetic military helicopter flee the Milwaukee airspace, totally ignoring them. Our IQ-improved survivors would recognize this to be an alarming indicator of the state of the world around them. The minute the crew observed this, the smart move would have been to immediately ask the mall cops to help them brainstorm a way to rescue Andy, while also getting their hands on some valuable American firepower. This process of critical thinking would have led them all to recognize the employee parking lot needed to be cleared. It would also allow them to realize that the mall likely wouldn't be a sustainable location in the long run due to the fact that said mall had no farming goods store, and also due to the fact that American malls don't generally tend to have large stockpiles of non-perishable foods. In addition to this, they'd also come to understand that the backup generator would eventually run out of fuel or just break down from a lack of maintenance, upkeep that no member of the team could realistically perform. And last but not least, this little brainstorming session could cause our cast of survivors to acknowledge the existence of shuttle buses within the employee parking garage. buses which could be reinforced to eventually allow the crew to rescue Andy and then to subsequently bug out of Milwaukee when needed. Later that night, everyone would have seen the news, and it would become quite obvious that this zombie uprising was a global event. And when they wake up in the morning, the lack of any broadcasting on the TVs would cement the need for them to bug out of Milwaukee. Help isn't coming, and it would be fairly safe to assume, or rather fairly obvious to deduce, that the undead population would only grow with time. Maybe they could try to outlast these rotting bodies, but if they take that gamble and the undead don't decompose to the point of being harmless, then they'd be stuck in a location that isn't sustainable in the long run, while being surrounded by even more undead freaks, just like they were at the end of the movie. Hence, logic would dictate to our cognitively enhanced survivors that leaving Milwaukee sooner rather than later is the best way for them to maximize their odds of survival. But before they could even begin their preparations, they would be alerted to the arrival of an erratic box truck driving into the parking lot of their mall. Now, the more intelligent CJ would not protest the admission of these new survivors, instead recognizing that a desperate group of people driving a literal fucking truck could easily compromise the safety of their safe haven if they're forcibly rejected from the mall. Desperate people are willing to do desperate things. Plus, they're gonna need all the manpower they can get their hands on, given that they're planning to rescue Andy and take as many guns as possible when they bug out of the city. Now, once the box truck survivors are allowed into the mall, the intelligent thing to do would have been to quarantine these people, especially that fat bitch who was literally on death's door. I mean, just look at her. It's quite clear she's unwell. If Anna were smarter, as she is in this scenario, she would have been able to connect the dots fairly quickly. Her man got bit by a zombie, he died, he turned. Pretty fucking obvious if you ask me. Hence, the idea of quarantining these survivors would have made sense once they checked for bites. Bites they would have quickly discovered on the nameless juggernaut and on Nicole's dad. Once the big lady is put down and once Nicole's dad is terminated, the crew would begin to explain the plan to the new arrivals. If Steve is still a prick, Kenneth would beat some discipline into him with the help of CJ. After all of this is accomplished, the mall survivors would go on to clear the parking garage together. This would likely play out the same way it did in the canonical timeline, with Bart getting iced by the undead. After using fire to slowly melt the brains of the undead, the parking garage would be cleared and the group would now begin to reinforce these buses. They ain't got time to play games with Andy and draw more zombies to their location. They need to get to work now. As such, they'd begin to stock the buses with non-perishable food, water, winter clothing, tools, and additional fuel, all held in any safe container they could find. Also, let's just be clear about this. They ain't doing that stupid chainsaw slit shit that got the hot chick killed in the actual movie. Fuck that dumb shit. We're trying to survive here, screw the rule of cool. Be that as it may, our cast of intellectually superior survivors would scour the mall for maps. After all, they need to find a new suitable home. One which is in close proximity to fresh water, near wild game, and one which is far away from civilization. Assuming they find a map, which, let's be real, it's a mall, they're gonna find a map, I could see the group electing to relocate to the Chamagan-Nicollet National Forest. This national park is 1 million acres in size, or roughly 1,562 square miles in size. The greater Milwaukee area can literally fit within this region quite comfortably. No doubt the undead would not be able to find our survivors if they can safely arrive at the national forest. There's plenty of freshwater lakes, it's very desolate with plenty of wildlife in the area, while also possessing some cabins at the Sailor Lake picnic grounds. Also, one must note that the buses themselves could be used as a form of shelter. This journey would be roughly 288 miles in distance because the Crossroads Mall's location is fictional and I can only present you all with an estimate, but with extra fuel, the shuttle buses could easily accomplish such a trip. These buses should be able to cover more than 200 miles with a full tank. The extra fuel would just ensure that they can successfully arrive at their destination. The extra fuel would also be needed to take alternative routes, as the intelligent move would be to avoid major highways. After a week or so of hard labor, the rescue operation would begin. And there wouldn't be a sea of undead super sprinters, because said operation would occur weeks before it did within the official canonical timeline. Luda would also still be pregnant, as she only gave birth roughly 1 month into their stay at the mall. The buses would burst through the garage doors and they would head straight to the gun shop, parking parallel to the building right alongside the wall. The survivors would then get onto the rooftop of the bus, using the emergency exits, and they would then toss a makeshift rope up to Andy, who would then secure the rope on his end. Then, over the course of some time, they would lower bags filled with guns and ammunition into one of the buses. After this, eventually Andy himself would join the team. These buses never once lost their integrity within the main timeline. Hence, we can safely assume that with the proper reinforcements, they would be impregnable. Remember folks, the undead can't even get past metal shutters or shatterproof glass. Now, after this seamless operation is completed, our group would head for their new destination, being fully armed, well-fed, stocked with food and tools, and well-prepared. And it is here where I must end this what if, as there's no way for me to determine whether or not they would survive their journey to Shamakan-Nicolet National Forest, nor is there any way for me to truly deduce whether or not they would survive the winter. I can say, however, that their odds of survival would be much higher than traveling to some obviously populated Great Lake Island on a barely functioning boat. I can also say that, in this specific timeline, only one member of the cast has died thus far, being Bart, with the big lady and Nicole's dad being casualties we couldn't possibly prevent. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the damn bell as well if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined down in the comments section. I'm Captain Gold and hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.